All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining. Chris Neidl here. Appreciate you joining us for this latest episode of This is CDR. Really excited about today's session. This is our 114th episode, hard to believe. My name is Chris Neidl. I'm one of the co-founders of OpenAir and am fortunate to be the host of this weekly program where we get together every Tuesday at 12 o'clock Eastern time to talk to really some of the most interesting people doing things of significance in the carbon dioxide removal world. So this includes a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people heading startups, but also quite a few different subject experts and people within the science community as well as the policy community. So really excited to continue our streak here today. And for those of you, I know we have a lot of regular members of our viewing audience here, but just a little bit of background on OpenAir. OpenAir, founded back in 2018, also hard to believe, is a all-volunteer carbon dioxide removal advocacy network and support community. And our members are located all over the world, and we work on a lot of different areas of need in terms of bringing carbon dioxide removal to the mainstream and ultimately to scale. A big part of our work, which I'll be talking about next week as the actual presenter on the show, is we advocate for a lot of CDR-related policies, particularly at the state and municipal level here in the United States, but also occasionally at the national level in other parts of the world. So we have multiple bills to our name that we've gotten introduced and quite a few passed over the last several years. And we have a very active 2025 legislative season, which I'll be talking about in depth next week for the show. Also have some great projects related to citizen science and research and development. This program is certainly kind of our flagship education program, this webinar, but we have other projects that we work on as well. And we also do, in different ways, either support novel CDR business models, or sometimes we work directly with CDR suppliers or communities to stand up CDR projects. We featured some of those on the show before, such as the Naka Valley Biochar project in Uganda. But if you want to find out more and meet people in our community, do go ahead and jump into our Discord, which is where we all hang out and talk with each other, kind of like Slack. Tank will go ahead and drop the link for how you can join that. And relevant to today's program, we're actually going to have one of our most diehard members, Mike Robinson, who actually connected us with today's guest, is going to talk about a new mission, which we call the projects that we work on here at OpenAir. That's really starting today, kind of a soft launch that's focused on an effort related to today's subject. So Mike will pop on at the end and tell us a little bit about that. And you can connect with him in our Discord if you want to participate and learn more. So as for today's show, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my weekly co-host, Tank, to join and introduce our guest. Hey, Tank, how you doing?
Good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing good, man.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm Tank Chen. I am the OpenAir volunteer. I'm based in Taiwan. Today, we're very excited to welcome Thomas and Rio to our show. And so Thomas Annicq. Thomas is the CEO of Oneshot.earth. He is a seasoned entrepreneur. After earning his MBA at MIT Sloan, he founded Thustles, a big data MIT spinout, and Quantify Labs, which was acquired by Palantir and Exxon Vibe. Drawn to the potential carbon market to drive climate action, Thomas founded Oneshot.earth to bring scalable trust and transparency to this emerging space. Rio is the CPO of Oneshot.earth, combines a background in consulting and sustainable investing with a focus on product innovation. After starting her career at Bain, she joined a sustainable investing startup before completing her MBA at MIT. Since joining Oneshot.earth in 2022, Rio has overseen product development, including the launch of the Open Carbon Protocol. Thomas, Rio, welcome to This is CDR.
Thank you. As Tank mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. After my last company, I was making angel investments in climate. And while it was exciting to see the solutions to some of our biggest problems, it was frustrating to see how slow it was moving. So I started looking for ways to accelerate that. In particular, I was looking for a financial instrument that represents a unit of climate impact, a climate asset. And that's how I ended up in carbon markets. And there I found that the missing link was a solution that's highly scalable, non-fragile, with no conflicts of interest as a registry. Rio?
Great. I won't go too much into my background, what I do at Oneshot, because Tank so nicely introduced us. But just to provide a bit more context on what we're building with the Open Common Protocol, we, as Thomas mentioned, got founded a few years ago. And since then, we've been running pilots for new methodology development and new project development with a range of sectors. So we work both in CDR, we have ongoing pilots in biochar and ocean alkalinity right now, but also in reduction projects such as oil and gas well plugging and refrigerant destruction as well. And today we're here to talk about our approach to methodology development. So I'll hand back over to Thomas to talk a bit more about the OCP.
Yeah, so the OCP is a new type of registry, and we are focused on scale and integrity. With the unlock now of Article 6, we're seeing a massive increase of the number of methodologies that the market will see. And we feel we need to be able to serve these and to serve these at scale and without breaking. And so the OCP was designed to solve three problems. So the scalability of new methodologies, the delays to get a new methodology approved today or an existing one updated with the latest science is not measured in weeks or months, but it's years. And that's understandable. This work is incredibly complex. There's lots of nuance. But if it's not scalable, we're not moving the needle. And so by including the whole ecosystem in the process, there are no constraints to how many methodologies can be developed in parallel. And that's how we can increase the clock speed. The second component is the transparency of data and the integrated MRV. Data today is either stuck in unstructured PDFs, or it's often not even accessible to buyers or rating agencies or insurers, and that needs to be solved. And lastly, we need to create interoperability between the registry and everyone else in the market. That means methodology writers, project developers, buyers, rating agencies, insurance players, etc. We need to change from the antagonistic framework that we're in today to a constructive ecosystem.
So the way we do this at the Open Common Protocol is through two separate tools. On one side, we have our registry, and this contains everything to do with new projects and new credits. So everything from proposing new projects to getting them validated, and the DMRV component that goes into credit issuance. It sits independent of our methodology development tool, which is the focus of our discussion today. So we won't really cover it in detail right now, but if you want more information, there's plenty on our website. So our methodology development tool provides a platform for methodology proposers to work with our community of experts to collaboratively and iteratively improve on carbon crediting methodologies and to eventually reach consensus over which methodology should be approved or rejected. Anyone can propose a methodology on the OCP. For example, we have methodologies that have been proposed by NGOs, by academic groups, by project developers, and eventually by buyers as well. This methodology proposer will then work with an expert panel made out of our expert community, who are all external and independent of the OCP team. Together, this panel will decide on how to improve the methodology, and the voting experts will decide whether to approve the methodology. This decentralized approach means that the best experts can work on methodologies at any given point, and the process can run in parallel, as Thomas mentioned earlier, which removes a lot of the bottlenecks in the development process. So while we're not involved in the actual writing of the methodologies, our methodology development platform and process is designed around 8 key principles. So firstly, trust from consensus. So we bring together the most relevant experts from across the market and a range of backgrounds and experiences. And we let them decide which methodologies should get approved or not, instead of just making the decision top down as a registry. Second, we really keep the methodology development and the registration of projects independent from each other. So the OCP registry and team have no input into whether methodologies get passed or not, which reduces the conflict of interest of then taking revenue from issuing credits. Thirdly, our process is highly collaborative, which is what today's discussion is all about. So our platform allows asynchronous commenting and responding, and allows both the methodology proposer and the experts to ask questions and start discussions on various topics. The asynchronous platform means that more people can get involved, and it means that stakeholders from all countries and time zones can take part equally. Our fourth principle is being transparent on risk. So all methodologies and all projects right now have an inherent level of risk on them. And some of that is dependent on the sector, and some of that is dependent on the projects themselves. I think as a registry and as methodology development, we need to be very transparent on where those risks and uncertainties lie and make sure that's communicated fully with all the stakeholders on the market. Fifth, as Thomas mentioned, we want this process to be highly scalable. So being able to run methodology processes in parallel means that we can move things faster, but also help methodology proposers working in novel or niche streams of work to make sure that they're also being served by the carbon markets. Sixth, we've based our process around the peer review system used in academic journals. Experts are anonymous while the process is ongoing to reduce bias, but all comments and everyone involved are published when the methodology gets approved or not. Seventh, we're designing methodologies to be anti-fragile. So anti-fragile systems are those that improve as a result of shocks and mistakes. We believe that methodologies should remain dynamic and adapt to new and updated findings on both the science and on carbon market policy. We run an annual audit process of all methodologies on our platform, as well as an ongoing process to make sure that they're constantly updated and that these updates are communicated well with all the users of our platform. And finally, we believe methodology should become more modular. So we're moving away from long PDF documents towards methodologies designed as discrete chunks of data on topics such as additionality and permanence, which can then be shared between project types and sectors. We're also looking at some of the cross-sector and cross-industry work, which can help share learnings between everyone in the market. So just to give a bit of context, this is our high-level overview of the methodology development process. So as mentioned, anyone can submit a methodology in our platform, and this is proposed directly on the OCP. The proposer inputs all of the key details into a form that's based on ISO and ICBCM guidelines and adds key questions and discussion points to guide the initial discussion. Next, an expert panel is created, and that's with input from not only our expert community as a whole, but the methodology proposer, also third-party independent expert networks that we work with, and finally, our independent advisory board. Once the expert panel is finalized and onboarded, the first round of feedback kicks off. So the expert panel works in 2-week cycles to help provide feedback and ask questions about what direction methodology should go in. From round 2 onwards, voting experts have the option to conditionally approve it, although we've found this usually takes 4 to 6 rounds so far. After a quorum of experts have conditionally approved it, it then goes out for public commentary. We run a 30-day public commentary period for each methodology, plus also allow anyone to submit comments and feedback at any time after the initial public commentary period. Once the public commentary has been concluded, the methodology proposer obviously takes those comments, responds to them, makes any updates as required, before the methodology goes into a final round of approval. If it's approved, it's then available on the open OCP methodology page for anyone with or without an account to view. And we also publish rejected methodologies in a separate part of our site because we think it's important that this information is open and available for other people working in the sectors or on other similar methodologies. Finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we integrate DMRV at kind of the 2 stages. So we believe that methodology should lay out boundaries and requirements for high quality quantification of GHG removals. So where suitable, we like to include DMRV partners on the expert panel as non-voting experts to make sure that they can provide their input on what best-in-class data collection looks like and what reporting should look like to the registry. Then when we use these methodologies, when project developers use these methodologies to propose projects in the registry, we allow them to connect their data collection software directly into the OCP or an API. And this can come from either their internal tools or from a third-party DMRV provider. This then reduces a lot of the bottlenecks to the verification process, since all data still needs to be verified, and helps improve the clock speed of credit issuance. So in the traditional carbon markets, credits were issued annually, and often annually quite a big duration of time after the actual impact is taking place. But we can do it in a more automated way at kind of any given period of time that the project developer wants. So that's a high-level view of our methodology development platform. I think we'll talk later about Mike's work, who's going to be putting a new protocol through the process. And yeah, we'd love to answer kind of any questions.
Excellent, great. Let me go ahead and bring Tank up too, in case he's got some questions. Really interesting. A lot of what you're doing is very much shares a lot of, I think, kind of intellectual overlap probably with what OpenAIRE is about to a large degree. We are very much based on the idea of the more brains and eyeballs that you have working on something is most likely to be the most prolific in its output, but also the highest quality, because it has obviously a self-regulating kind of feature to it when you have a real conversation going around with different experts. So I am really interested in quite a few questions, which I'd love to kind of touch on. We also have some really great questions already from the audience, so they're quite practical. Let's do this though, just to start off. We have a lot of real CDR and carbon nerds as part of our regular audience, as you would expect. But let's just define some terms a little bit that you used, and then you can define them in terms of how they're relevant, I guess, to your model. So I'm just going to kind of lay those out, and I'll let you guys give a kind of a quick definition for it. So let's just start with the Article 6 piece and how that's relevant. If you want to just quickly define that, and then we can work from there.
Yeah. So, around Article 6, you're going to start seeing more countries looking to create methodologies around the carbon assets that they're holding. And
it's part of the Paris Agreement, just to be
exactly. Sorry, yeah. As part of the Paris Agreement, there's two types of, there's Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. Article 6.4 will rely on methodologies that will come from the UN. But around 6.2, there's going to be a plethora of methodologies that we're going to see popping up. And to like when that wave is coming, and we're starting to see it, the infrastructure that we have in the market today is not built to scale. And then there's two pathways. Either these methodologies are going to sit there outside of the system, unreviewed, and have the types of friction and the risks that are associated with that, or they can go to something that, like what we've built, that can scale easily and provide the peer review that will sorely be needed there, so that these methodologies can actually operate in an international ecosystem.
Great. And then some of the key entities in this ecosystem, you mentioned rating agencies, registries, and ISO. So maybe we can just give a quick kind of overview of what those are, but particularly how you're intervening in that ecosystem vis-a-vis these different kinds of entities. We can start with that. Let's start with registries. That's
do you want me to take that, Rio? Yeah, so I think the evolution of the carbon markets from carbon markets 1.0 to carbon markets 2.0. Some people say it's 3.0. It doesn't really matter. But this new focus on bringing integrity and trust to this market. We see the registries being part of that, and that's a lot of that is driven by this industry-wide effort from the ICVCM, the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Markets, which has set a baseline for every registry and every methodology to apply to, we've had the luxury of building the Open Carbon Protocol as they gave out their guidance. So we feel very blessed in that we've just been able to follow a roadmap. So that, that's in terms of like the registry carbon market ecosystem. What's also happened at the same time is that because for a lot of corporations, it was for a lot of buyers, it was very difficult to assess quality just by, buying in the market. So we saw rating agencies come into the market, and these rating agencies, they assess the integrity of these claims that these methodologies create. And we think that is an exciting development because you have more eyes and more perspective in the ecosystem to bring, to drive quality forward. And you're starting to see that effect already. Like the higher rated projects end up commanding higher prices. So that's on the rating agencies, and I think then the last one I think that we're quite excited about is the insurance ecosystem that's popping up. It is a very complex problem that they're tackling, but we're quite excited. And I think what underlies all of this and where we take cues from is that they all have perspectives on where the risks lie. And so it is our role as a registry to make sure that those factors of risk, that they're transparent, that they're accessible, and that they're well documented.
Gotcha. So let's get in. We'll get into the CDR part of this because we're in a CDR is as everybody knows, really interesting. It's the sort of classic building the plane while trying to fly, and it's somewhat of an abstract commodity to talk about a removed ton, and so it really starts with the standards to even be able to define what it is that we're even talking about, quantify it, let alone trade it and qualify it. But one of the questions I had, to kind of start off is that what you're doing is really you're basically crowdsourcing, and there's sort of a market function there where you're going to start seeing, well, here's a methodology for a thing that the regular kind of market wouldn't take because it would seem to be too expensive to develop a methodology around that because it's so fringe, and you're opening up a door to allow for a broader range of solutions to be methodologized, for lack of a better term. But it seems like there still might be somewhat of a bottleneck, and I'm curious about the design of these stages that you talked about, the expert panel. You guys could be catastrophically successful, I could imagine, where suddenly you get a whole bunch of different methodologies that are coming through that still do ultimately have to be reviewed and go through these stages. So can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of the architecture of how that process works, how you bring in these experts? Are they volunteers, and that allows you to sort of scale that part of it? So anything you can kind of share about the inside of that process would be illuminating.
Of course. So our community of experts are kind of all external to the OCP team, which means that we can work with hundreds, if not thousands, of experts at any given time. Especially, as you mentioned, some of the smaller sectors or kind of fields of interest might only have a few tens max of people working in them globally. And so it means that we can always make sure that we're working with like the top experts in the field. So we have our kind of existing community of experts. So that's the people that we've already been working with over the last few years. These are often, people that we're introduced to by other experts is probably the biggest kind of pipeline we have. But we also do a lot of outreach. We work with universities, we go to conferences to make sure that we know kind of who the top names in any sector are. And then each panel, the panels are assembled on a methodology kind of level. So for each given methodology, a panel of somewhere between 8 and 20 experts are assembled, and they work kind of for that methodology in that time frame. And we generally are seeing methodologies get approved in the kind of 6 to 8 month kind of time period. And we pay most of our experts. We pay all of our voting experts and also any experts working in the Global South. We just think that this encourages engagement in the process and kind of is making sure that people are getting the correct compensation for work done. And that compensation is independent of the outcome of the methodology. So even if it gets kind of rejected after one round, the experts still get compensated, because that's actually a really important learning as well. And so as you kind of were referring to, I think there's going to be a lot of new ideas that come out over the next few years, and we kind of need to put them out in the world and see whether and when they get to a stage where they can be used to issue carbon credits. And I do think that carbon credits in particular are quite a well-defined, I guess, unit. And so there is a natural barrier where a methodology has to be able to say that if you follow it, then 1 ton of carbon dioxide is going to be reduced or removed. And I do think that some sectors might not be able to conservatively get to that point right now, but it's still important for them to be going through the process and getting the experts kind of lined up and giving them feedback. And so at whatever point it is when they can get to that, then they're kind of on the path already to be able to issue carbon credits, because that's at the minute probably the biggest source of financing for most of these projects. And we want to make sure that these projects are getting financed at the early stages so they can get to the point where they can scale into the very large amounts of removal that we need.
Right. Thomas, you took your mic off. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think you made the point of we're building the plane as we're flying it. I think what's very clear, or for the technologies where it's clear what the directionality is, I think those we can start serving, even if the uncertainties around some of the measurements are high. As long as we are very transparent about those uncertainties and about that risk that creates, we can there's something to work with, and we think that's particularly relevant in the CDR space.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about what is kind of popping up already, and also the stage that you guys are at, in terms of obviously new, but how much traffic are you kind of getting through there? But just back to one point, just so I'm clear, and this maybe is more of a kind of a question about your own revenue model, because it seems like there still is a limiting factor. If you have experts, you only have so much time, and particularly if you're paying them, that there's a kind of a bandwidth that you have, I guess, for being able to metabolize methodologies that sort of come in. Let's start with the fundamental question, though, in case I missed it and I'm too slow. But in terms of your overall revenue model that allows you to kind of support this work, I don't know if you could kind of elaborate a little bit more on the business side of things for you guys.
Of course. So our revenue model is very simple. When credits, so it's entirely based on a registry tool. So when credits are first transferred, so that means when they leave the project developer's account to go to a buyer, we charge a 2% fee based on the price and quantity of the credits transferred. We have kind of no fees ahead of that, although to be very transparent, we are still figuring out exactly how the validation fees either get ingested by us or we pay them and then take a fee from the project developer itself. We're working through a number of scenarios with our validation partners on that. But yeah, we do think that we wanted to link our revenue to the point of climate impact, and also when the project developers are getting value from our product, which really is when the credit is first sold. And so we don't charge for anything for methodology development, but then when those credits are being sold, we take it at that point. And I do think that there's a lot of questions about registries' compensation models, and I think they're all very, very important. And so, this was our hypothesis of a way that reduces conflicts of interest as much as possible. And I guess in terms of the actual cost of methodology development, we do still see it being much cheaper than building in-house teams, especially when you have to build one for each sector, because our experts probably spend around kind of 6 to 12 hours per round in general. And so over kind of, the average of 5 rounds, it's still a lot cheaper for us than having to hire, 8 to 10 experts in-house to do the same work.
Right. It's like the high quality Fiverr of protocol development here.
Well, no,
Sorry,
it's more, it's more like an academic
I
journaling
know. Yeah. I meant just in
but
terms of the way in which it's very fluid in terms of people being able to come and work on short-term things that is relevant to their subject expertise, rather than you having maintaining a large internal staff of experts that could potentially cover everything.
yeah.
So, poor analogy, but that was what I meant to relay. This is related to it. And Tank, I thought we'd pull this up just to maybe, I keep thinking of, like, do you guys have something like a GitHub in the background where people post it and there's sort of open? So this was a question from Jochen. Hey, Jochen, how you doing? Our friend in Spain. Just about, like, a little bit more on the nuts and bolts of, okay, the methodology is there. Is there there must be some kind of standard framework that allows these things to be comparable and analyzed in a way. Tell us a little bit about that and how your experts and other, interveners sort of interact with it to make it better, or to analyze it.
Yes, definitely can go into this. So as I kind of mentioned before, we're moving away from just having a PDF upload to actually the methodology proposer uploading a methodology in sections. And so the sections themselves, I won't go into too much detail, but you can find them in our handbook, which is available on our website. But basically cover what ISO and ICD-CM set forward as good methodologies. So that's, starting with eligibility, what projects should or shouldn't be included under a methodology, and then going on to questions such as additionality and permanence, checking which projects would be valid or not valid to issue carbon credits. And then we have a kind of big section on the quantification equation. So this is kind of the key part of most CDR methodologies, I think, is actually calculating, with levels of uncertainty and how you actually get to that final ton number for carbon dioxide removed. And so we do allow a little bit of flexibility. So while we have it in sections, we also allow methodology curators to add their own sections or edit titles. And especially in the initial upload, they can kind of not upload much and just say, we're looking for input into these sections. It very much should be collaborative. And I think the sections are more to, as you say, make sure that methodologies are comparable, even across sectors and across both CDR and the reduction projects that we're working on as well. While still being flexible enough, because obviously these sectors are quite different and the things that are going to be important in one sector are often different in other sectors.
Great. A couple things on that. And Thomas or Rio, if you have it, we did drop your both Oneshot and Open Carbon Projects websites just to make it easier for people. That handbook would be really interesting. And I could see you guys really benefiting. Well, I guess two questions. One thing is, I am curious if having a little bit of educational material or tutorials to kind of get people to a point where they're confident that, yes, this is for me to put it in there. I could see you guys really, doing some really interesting things around that. So would love you to speak to that. But one of the things I'm really interested in is, you had mentioned, Rio, about, again, I look at this through an open source lens, and this isn't strictly open source. It has a lot of the kind of network anatomy of, leveraging the world and getting things to sort of come in. But one of the genius things about open source is the ability to adapt. It's never done. It's always open, and there could be pull requests and there could be things like this. And that's where I would wonder if it's possible, like you get a methodology published, but it seems like the level of effort required to approve a modification to that protocol would be just as much of a heavy lift as the initial methodology, that you'd have to convene the same types of actors. But let me know if I'm wrong on that, if I'm misreading that.
Yeah, I think we kind of see edits to methodologies being kind of in two categories. There's the minor edits that maybe don't require a full expert panel. And then there are the major changes that may require either a subset or a full expert panel review, as you said. And I think we will kind of remain flexible about how exactly those panels will work. I do think, as you are kind of getting to, I think we want to make this process as streamlined as possible, but at the same time, there is always going to be some kind of human input into all of this. And I think especially at this point when the market needs that trust, it's very important to continue to do that. But we're kind of trying to make the process as efficient as possible.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, and I think that point that you mentioned of the continuous iteration is something that for us it is quite important, right? And especially in these, early methodologies where as the science gets better and more data gets collected, we see these methodologies continuously getting better and those uncertainties getting smaller. So any time that we can do that, like that will get done, whether it's triggered by the annual checkup or triggered by someone in the ecosystem pointing potential upgrade out.
Yeah, and I have to jump in and look. I should have done that before, but I will be, as what Mike will be talking about soon. Just clarify something for me too, and I may have missed it in the presentation. So you have your experts, right? You have the person or people who publish the methodology, but it's inside there for a little while where others that are within, I guess, a community, for lack of a better term, maybe that's the perfect term for it, they can then comment on it to get it even better before there's a go time where it's like, all right, we're ready for review. Is that kind of the way it works? Because that sounds
so I think for us, trust, like the way we've designed this is trust shouldn't come from authority, right? From a brand name, it should come from the process. And the way we've set up that process is that
that's a really
we need we need to get consensus around the methodology, right? And that consensus, you could get that just from the academic and the carbon experts, but that's like a very narrow lens. For us, the ecosystem is much wider. So can we bring in buyers, other project developers, rating agencies, insurance companies, a financing partner? Can we have them all sit at that expert level and provide feedback to the methodology to make it as good as it can be before it goes for its final yay or nay?
I just have to say as an aside, there's not really a business model in this, but the way that you're doing this around protocols is sort of my dream for how you develop legislation. I work mostly on policy, and we kind of do that in a sort of a organic way where we will surface an idea and then crowd in different experts. And then that, as you said, perfect quote, it reminds me of a Eleanor Ostrom quote that you just said about the process is the thing that confers ultimately the quality and the trust, that it's same for legislation. If you could say, this is what we came up with by going through the exact same process that you laid out. And you could say, look at all the people who had their fingerprints on this and the different areas they're coming with. So I can understand the value in what you're doing just through looking at it in my own neighborhood of work.
No, and I think, and then the last component for us is then transparency around how that consensus got created, right? So Rio mentioned how we publish all of that back and forth alongside with the methodology, so that you understand, well, why did they decide on a factor of 10? Did they think about 12 or 8? And because then when you are looking to buy these credits, you want to see that is addressed, right? And that there's a rationale for these types of decisions.
Great. Well, I'd love to pull in some questions here. Some of them I think we covered just through the course of our conversation, but some really smart questions. Before I do that, can you just tell us a little bit about, because you cover a broad scope of credits, but like, what are you anticipating already seeing as what's popping up in terms of methodology requests on the CDR side in terms of pathways? Like, there's certain areas that are quite well covered and already quite well established, but it's really the ones that are really high prospect, but still kind of on the margins in terms of a market that I could see this really working for, doing a real service for. But what's it looking like right now in terms of CDR participation?
Yeah, I would say, so we have 2 CDR methodologies in review right now. One is a biochar methodology, and it was actually proposed based on one of the rating agencies' biochar framework. So trying to meet some of the kind of topics that rating agencies have brought up to what would be a good biochar project. And then we're also working with an ocean alkalinity project developer to basically help them quantify what they're doing. And it's quite a good example because their approach is slightly different from some of the other ocean alkalinity approaches. And so making sure that we have specific methodologies that actually can account for the differences is really important. I think I'll leave the big reveal to Mike on what his new methodology is going to be covering. But as you say, I think we can cover all sectors. And so if people have novel technologies that kind of aren't in the pipeline for other registries, then we'd love to talk to people and help them kind of get that off the ground.
I had OAE in mind, actually, is exactly the kind of one that would probably be early to that. Well, I think we can go to some questions here. And Tank, I think we should give Toby Bryce sort of founder's privilege there. I know he was the last question in, but Toby is was the mind and driver of This is CDR and the host up until recently when I took over, and set a very high standard. And he thinks about this stuff all the time. So maybe we could start with Toby's questions and then kind of get into the other ones. Does that sound good, Tank?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think I have the similar questions as well. So if you think about, registries in CDR, most of them develop their own standards, and then they, the methodology and the protocol follow those standards. Where in your case, you follow the ISO and ICD-CM, or ISO is a standard. So what are some other more specific differences that you have from incumbent CDR registries like ISO or Puro?
Of course. And yeah, we definitely, Toby, just to respond to your kind of comment, but we definitely play in the same field as Puro and Isometric, and we really like the work that we're doing, that they're doing even, sorry. But I think how we see ourselves as different is through this independent methodology process. Puro and Isometric have, their own methodology process, which is very in-house. They do have communities inputting into them, but we think that our process can run more processes in parallel. And I do think we also have, kind of outside of the CDR, we are learning a lot from our reduction projects as well, and kind of having a more broad scope, I think, allows us to kind of learn about the similarities and differences and learnings across the whole carbon market, not just focusing on CDR. But yeah, overall, I do think that, I think we should tackle this problem from a lot of different approaches. I think it's very clear that, we need a lot more projects to get off the ground sooner rather than later, and making sure they're high quality. And so we definitely see ourselves as kind of helping to fill the gap between the work that they're doing.
Great. And in about 10 minutes, we're going to have Mike come up. Now that I know a lot more about this, just through this really great conversation, I do see there's a really, really cool role, I think, for open air members to sort of play with this. So Mike will be up in just shortly to be able to explain that too. So do stick around for that. But yeah, let's go ahead, Tank, and take some other questions. I think some were kind of absorbed into the conversation already. So whichever one you want to start with, we can. Really good questions, guys. Keep them coming.
Yeah, well, let's go to the details. So here is how about Joe's questions on how you measure efficiency?
This one here? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So this will be nature-based CDR, but I think this could apply to other more durable CDR methods as well. So you could speak to that.
Yeah, interesting question. Kind of our methodologies will set, I guess, the standard to which the MRV process will work. And so I can't answer this question at a kind of registry level, because we do kind of see each methodology should kind of set its own standards based on what the experts think are right. There was an earlier question as well, just on kind of efficiency in general. I think the way we approach MRV is kind of twofold. I think one is the kind of pure calculation of tons removed. And so this is purely the kind of what's set out in the methodology in terms of the calculation. And then that's what goes into automated credit issuance. There's then kind of all other data, and efficiency is a big part of that, where it's kind of really important for buyers and stakeholders, especially to be able to compare between projects and methodologies. And that is worked out on a more methodology or project level basis. So that was a kind of a non-answer, but I hope that was helpful, Joe. I guess right now we actually don't really have kind of any pure nature-based CDR right now. So we'll kind of tackle those questions when someone proposes it.
Yeah. One thing I'll just put up here, which isn't a question so much, but just me too. And hopefully we'll be generating our own case studies through Mike's initiative. But I think I can visualize a lot of what you're talking about. I'm very excited to come in, but it will be good to have you back, or if you ever want to share some sort of case studies of how this has sort of worked, we'll be sure to amplify them. Would be good. All right, Toby. Really good questions
Just
from
to-
Emily. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to put one thing in there. On our OCP.earth website, there's a case study of the first methodology that's already been approved, which was non-CDR. It was a reduction methodology that you can go read about our work with climate wells on our website.
Okay, great. I have an idea for methodology. It's much needed about bicarbonates in concrete because that's something that's kind of remains somewhat invisible within normal ways in which environmental impact of that material is, that it's not counting the impact of negative emission materials automatically. And so anyway, we can geek out on this, but consider me very, very interested. Tank, what should we do next? Emily,
go with Emily's question.
So Emily has, I'm just going to pop this up just for the beginning of the question. So she's talking about too much information, but provides a little bit. And we talked about this a little bit before. How do you sort of funnel this in a way? But maybe if you could just re-articulate it again, because I think I have a better understanding of it through your earlier responses. But yeah, how do you manage the sort of information overload in your system?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think one thing that really came across when we were building this was just the pure amount of information that was impossibly hard to find. And as you say, wade through. I guess in terms of the methodology itself, one thing we're doing is moving it onto a more, I guess, searchable and dynamic methodology on a page. And so there you can surface key information in sections that you particularly have questions about. And we're also doing a lot of work kind of behind the scenes from a product team about kind of levels of information. So I think there's obviously the very high level information, which if you're just taking a first glance across the sector and trying to work out what methodology does what is what you should see kind of straight away. Then if you're maybe a project developer or someone looking to kind of use the methodology, it should be very easy to initially work out how, whether you fit within this methodology or whether you don't, like straight away kind of yes, no binary. And then obviously the details of how you do it. And then especially within the quantification, the methodology sets out the quantification, which is a lot of the data that underlies a project and especially a kind of issuance event. And so in our registry, we've been really thinking about how to present this both from a kind of calculation perspective and also as a buyer, let's say, seeing how the measurement links into the credits that you're actually buying. So it's definitely something that we are kind of actively working on. And I do think there's also some kind of quite interesting work being done at a kind of industry level to kind of align on data structures across the industry, which would I would hope would hopefully help people find the information they're trying to find.
Cool.
So I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, like I think what Rio talked about was just the information design. Like how do you display and surface the right information? I think the other component for us is the digital connections that we're making with the industry partners. So a rating agency has access to an API to get access to all of the data so that they can very easily issue a rating on a project. The same goes with insurance companies. They can just get connected directly to the system and have access to everything they need to provide an insurance quote for someone wanting to buy a credit without the sophistication that some other buyers have in understanding all of this data.
Got ya. Well, I think just so we leave good enough time for Mike, and there might even be a question or two that comes from that. There is a really good question from Josh, and Emily's second question is also quite good. So we'll get to those at the end, but I want to leave time for Mike. Before we do that, though, Jochen just asked a very basic question. When did you guys begin operations, and how many projects do you currently have approved so far? Is it that one that's on the site, or just to get a sense of how long you guys been doing this?
So we've been operating for about 3 years. I think our first methodology got approved last year, and the project from that is undergoing validation right now. So the first credits are going to be issued kind of in the next couple of months. And then I think the next couple of methodologies, which will be in probably Ocean CDR and some of the orphaned oil and gas wells, should also be kind of coming online quite soon as well.
Great.
So definitely new, but a lot kind of coming online and public soon.
Okay, sounds good. And so I'm bringing up Mike, and let me give those of you who don't know Mike. Mike is one of the kind of most diehard regular open air members and CDR advocates, who's done just an enormous amount of stuff, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. He's always my CDR homeboy who I talk to quite regularly. And this idea is one that you and I have batted back and forth for, Jesus, I don't know, 3 years maybe, the first time we started to think about this idea. So I'll let Mike go ahead and talk a little bit about this mission. Again, this is a project that we want to lead through the open air community with Mike at the helm, or as the convener. So go ahead, Mike, and tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Great, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'm Mike Robinson. For those who haven't met me along the way, like Chris said, I'm a diehard, longtime open air member. I'm also a co-founder of packclean.org, which is sort of a sister organization of open air focused specifically on the Pacific Coast, where we're pushing to, as rapidly as possible, increase greenhouse gas removal capacity up and down the Pacific Coast through education and advocacy and technology. This new mission that we're launching on the open air platform is a mission to develop an open source, as it says here, universal accelerated weathering protocol. And I think probably most of the people on here know what accelerated weathering is, but let me just give a quick recap for anyone who doesn't. Weathering is one of Earth's natural means, one of Earth's main natural mechanisms for moving carbon out of the short biological carbon cycle back into the long geological carbon cycle. Weathering happens when rainwater with CO2 in it forms carbonic acid, and when it interacts with alkaline minerals in rocks, it forms bicarbonates that run off in the water and end up sequestered in the ocean or another stable reservoir for 10,000 years plus. So it's a naturally occurring all around the world all the time. Accelerated weathering means we speed that up. So we give nature a hand in doing that weathering faster by taking those rocks and grinding them into very fine flour to, vastly increase the surface area available for that reaction, and then allowing that alkaline rock powder to react with water that has carbonic acid in it in a variety of settings. And so this is not a new thing. It goes by a lot of different names. Enhanced rock weathering is the name that's usually applied when the place where that reaction happens is a farm field, because this can be done in a farm where the dust is tilled into the dirt and it reacts with rainwater in the dirt and ultimately forms bicarbonates that end up running off and ending up in the ocean. It also can be done in rivers. It can be done in estuaries. It can be done in wastewater facilities. It can be done anywhere that you have high CO2 water to react with the alkaline dust. So that's why the universal accelerated weathering protocol we think makes sense, because no matter where you're doing this reacting, no matter what the job site is, a lot of the process is the same. Everything from the rock face to the job site, or from the industrial waste stream to the job site, is the same, no matter whether you're doing this process in dirt on a field, or potentially in a forest, or in a river, or a wastewater facility, or an estuary. Everything upstream of that is the same. All the considerations around feedstock characterization and for safety and efficacy, community engagement, environmental justice considerations, extremely precise LCA requirements, all of that's the same. Then on the job site, you're going to do that reaction in multiple ways. And so on the theme that Rio mentioned of protocols being modular, this allows us to cover the entire gamut of enhanced weathering or accelerated weathering use cases with a series of modules and with commonality between them for all the parts that are common. So on the job site, you do this reaction, and it results in demonstrating to the satisfaction of a buyer that a certain number of tons of CO2 have been turned into bicarbonate, which is durably sequestered in the ocean or another reservoir. From that point on, those tons should all be completely fungible, because that's what buyers are paying for, is turning CO2 in the environment into stably stored bicarbonate. So this open source protocol development effort will be operated on the open air platform. Best way to connect is either to join the open air Discord, which is where we'll be organizing this. And you also can reach me personally, Mike at packclean.org.
Yeah, Mike, what I did actually is I just created, so for those of you new to Discord, sometimes people come in, understandably, myself included, it can be a little chaotic if you don't quite understand what's going on. I added to the comments there a direct link. So even if you have an existing Discord account, you go directly there. Or if you click on that, it's the Discord GG/NV, etc. If you join through that, that means you'll pop right in to this very channel where this conversation will be starting right now. We literally just started the channel, and Mike will be there to greet you. And then Mike's tag on the Discord, I also put in there, which is just at Mike Robinson. So definitely join. This is really exciting. I will be, to the extent my bandwidth allows, Mike, I really do want to be involved in this. I think it's a great idea. And like so many things, thank you for leading it. So why don't you hang out here, Mike, for a sec. There were a couple of other good questions before we wrap up that I think we can probably get to. Tank, I think Emily's second question and then Josh's question are quite pertinent.
Yeah. Let's go with Emily's questions first on, how do you think about the potentials of influences on methodology from people with vested interests? Like, how do you navigate?
That's a big one. Yeah.
Conflicts of interest with stakeholders.
Yeah, so this is definitely something we think about a lot, especially because we want to include kind of everyone in the ecosystem, and often there are a lot of conflicts of interest. So that's kind of why we created our two-part expert panel. So we have a voting part of our expert panel, which is only people without conflicts of interest with whoever's proposing the methodology or with an incentive to see a methodology passed. And then we have a non-voting contributors panel, which includes anyone with a conflict of interest. And so when we are kind of doing the onboarding process for an expert panel, we run a full conflict of interest kind of check with all the experts to make sure that we're putting them into the right side of the panel. And then I guess kind of not only our process kind of stops it happening, but the fact that all the roles and names of the two parts of the expert panel and the decisions of the voting panel are all published along with the methodology. And so it's very easy to kind of make sure that when you're looking at a methodology that the people involved are kind of in their correct buckets, I would say.
Great. And then this is a big one, which maybe we can kind of zero in on one thing.
Yeah. So how would you align with, emerging frameworks that are coming like the CRCF or other ones once the protocol has been developed?
Yes, a great question. Probably not enough time in 2 minutes to cover it in the detail it deserves. But we're very much, we really are looking to work at this kind of increasing intersection between the voluntary markets and compliance markets, and especially things like regulation that's going to create frameworks for good quality methodologies and projects. And so, yeah, as we mentioned, the kind of Article 6 stuff earlier, which was more global, and then the EU also has a ton of frameworks. And so some of that is going to be making sure that those frameworks and experts are included during the initial methodology development process. And then also, if they come out kind of once a methodology has already been approved, making sure that that's included in the kind of annual audit process. That's a perfect example of like updated information that methodology should be kind of remain up to date on. But yeah, in terms of an actual, obviously a lot of this stuff is kind of evolving as we speak, which is why we think that having a kind of continuous improvement process is so important.
I agree and see the light now. So this was really great, guys. Really appreciate it. And I'm surprised we haven't met, before. So I'm glad Mike made this connection, and definitely consider Open Air interested in an ally in this. And I think we could do some pretty cool stuff together. So really appreciate it, Mike. Really appreciate it. Tank, as always, my friend. Thanks for, I don't know, I can't always remember what time it is in Taiwan right now when you're up there doing this. But we'll keep.
Thanks for convening.
Yeah, this will be the beginning of a conversation, I feel. So really appreciate it, guys. So for the remainder, next week, I'll have the Luma up. If you guys are subscribed to our Luma, Tank, I don't know if you dropped the link to that. We will have within the next hour or so next week's, and we'll send it out to our mailing list. It's going to be me again, and I'm going to be giving you a survey of the different state level legislation related to CDR. There's at least 6 bills that I'm directly working on in California, Colorado, and New York. And we need people to participate in that in a whole range of different ways. So I look forward to kind of giving you guys a bit of a landscape of what's cooking in 2025 and into 2026 on that. And then I'll also very soon be listing, we have a bunch of other ones that are scheduled too, that'll be on the Luma soon. Some ones that I'm really, really excited about that we'll talk about a little bit more next week, but we will keep on rolling. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining. All right. Catch you later.